Say what?
Hello and welcome back. It's time for Say What, where we hear from those connected to our industry about what's going on in our world of electrical apprenticeship. And this includes the topics that you're suggesting, so keep those coming. I'm your host, Cindy Sandifer, and it's May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And today we are joined by Dr. Charles, a therapist with Koinonia Counseling Center. And he's going to talk with us about mental health and our industry and how we can take better care of ourselves and each other. So, Dr. Charles, thank you so much for being here. This is something that's, I'm going to say, near and dear to my heart when we talk about mental health, because I just have this feeling that we put a lot of focus on our physical health, which is important, and our industry is hyper-focused on safety, as it should be, because of the dangers of working with electricity. But it's just one of those things that it's like, man, if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we're not able to do anything else we do, whether it's work, our families. And I actually learned this from you, and I've used it at work. What they say on the airplane, if the oxygen mask were to drop, put it on yourself first before helping others, because if you're not breathing well, you're probably not going to be able to assist anyone and then get to yourself. So I appreciate you taking time to be here to talk about this extremely important subject.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good to be here.
Good. Well, so let's do scales. Scale of 1 to 10, not musical scales because no one wants to hear me sing. Scale of 1 to 10 as a society, looking at us, let's say the United States, when it comes to recognizing the importance of our mental health, where do you think we fall typically from your therapeutic perspective?
Okay. Sounds like a simple enough question, right?
But it's not.
It actually is, but I'm going to make it a little more complicated.
Well, thanks.
Okay. So in the first place, when we think about recognizing, we can let's pull out the word recognizing and say that's an important word and attach it directly with mental health.
Okay.
And then if I were to answer the question that way, I would say our nation is good at recognizing mental health. I'd say a 7 or 8.
Okay.
But then when you add the word importance, recognizing the importance of mental health, believe it or not, I would still leave it at a 7 or an 8 because things have happened.
Okay.
However, when adding what does that really mean? That we are recognizing the importance of mental health. When you look at it that way, I think our society is acting as though mental health is important. I would give that a 3 or 4. So it's one thing to recognize it, it's another thing to act as though it really is. And that's where I think we're coming up short. Most mental health professionals are in concert. Man, we are in lockstep. You don't find a whole lot of difficulty, dissension among mental health professionals about all we're doing and everything that should be done. There's just not many issues with us because we depend upon research, we depend upon scientific methods, and we're just in lockstep when it comes to that stuff. But American mental health issues are not in the hands of mental health professionals. They're not in our hands.
Right.
They're in the hands of politicians. And that's really why it's going to be difficult for us to move beyond that 3 or 4 in my mind.
Right. Let's talk about the adult, male or female, that's at home and they're struggling with stress and anxiety.
Exactly.
And now they're having physical ailments and they think they're just physical ailments, right? Don't realize that it's actually because of mental health, this stress, this anxiety, maybe some depression that they're experiencing. And so they're treating a physical problem and that's fine. Treat your physical self. Like that's super important. But too often we've forgotten that mental health component that's actually been the catalyst for our physical problems.
That's exactly right. And to this day, I learned this years ago, but even to this day, upwards of 80%, 85% of what physicians treat is directly related to wrongly handled stress. Stress is really what causes most of our physical ailments. Anyway.
Right. Right. And I want to get into talking more specifically about our industry, but at the same time, like, I think when we're talking about getting to that 10, so I'm going to pull back on us as a society and look at it like, okay, there's a lot of things. We talk about intersectionality a lot. Like, we're all a lot of different things. So for me, I'll point out, I'm a woman, I'm a professional, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, right? So I have different people in my life, right, that I deal with. And so the importance of me getting to a 10, recognizing the importance of not only my own mental health, but the mental health of those around me, right? Because I have a spouse, I have children that are impacted, and they could be impacted by people they're around, right? Their own professional place or their schools or their friend group. And so seeing that, for me, it's like, okay, I may not be able to impact my world or my nation, or my state, but what can I do surrounding me? And I think to me, it's awareness and it's conversations like this.
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head, awareness and being willing to own up. Self-disclosure is important. I'm validating is important, but most of the things that are happening to this person has also happened to a ton of people. I mean, one thing I remember very well in being trained to be a therapist is, man, we all deal with the same stuff. The same stuff. And I tell all of my clients, it's not what happens in life, it's how you take it. And so once we can actually own up to some things, once you own up to some things and create a situation, an environment, whether it be in the workplace or home or where it is, that's conducive to allowing people to be able to talk about, what's bothering them, what's hurting them. That's a tremendous start, I think.
Yeah, and then we have stigmas, and that's been a problem for mental health, period, whether it's stigma about medication, stigma about going to counseling or therapy. But then I think there's almost two different things. So there's the one that I don't want anyone to know that I need to talk or take medication or get help. And then there's the other where it's like, well, my problem isn't as big as this thing. Like, I know this person that's dealt with this, or so my problem, I probably don't need to talk to anybody. I probably don't, but like you pointed out, we all go through stuff, and it's not, don't compare. I think that's one thing, like, don't compare what your situation is to someone else. If you're having stress, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, that matters.
It absolutely matters, because one of the things that in our society, we're concerned with what other people think, and that unfortunately that can lead to a lot of bad stuff. A lot of bad stuff. So we're far better if we can allow ourselves to understand that self-care is very, very important when it comes to mental health, when it comes to maintaining mental health, and whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. There are a number of things that can happen, that need to happen, in order for somebody to have solid, strong mental health. But for each individual, it may be different. But whatever you do, don't worry about stigmas. Don't worry about what other people think or what's going to be said. None of that stuff.
Yeah, that's at most a news cycle. If somebody wants to talk about something, it's going to come and go, and not worth risking, again, your health. Let's separate, or let's take away the mental, physical, your health, right? This is
Absolutely.
your health. So, okay, let's talk construction industry, because that's where we live. By we, I mean our, most of the people that would be listening.
Okay.
I know I've heard that the construction industry ranks pretty high with suicide rates. And I know we talked about this before we actually got here to the podcast. So your, whether it's experience or research, what would you tell us, I guess, about statistics with that?
Well, the statistics are not good. They're not good. Of every 100,000 construction workers, 45 will successfully commit suicide, when the national average is about 14. Now, obviously, all of the research and all of the studies that are done are going to vary somewhat, but none of them are good when it comes to this. About nearly 3.5, at least 3.25 times higher the suicide rate is higher among the construction industry than any other profession, than nearly any other profession, because believe it or not, it's second to medical doctors, and that includes interns and residents, those doing residency, which may be surprising to some people. But fortunately, there's a lifeline, the 988. It used to be, and still is, 1-800-273-8255, which is 1-800-273-TALK. Now, that still exists, but because of such a need, we now have 988 similar to 911. Even 911 will get you there, it just won't get you there as quickly as 988.
Right.
So, because it is so high in the United States, period, we now have this 988 number that you can call, and it will help you to get a hold of some trained counselors who are very well prepared and ready to help anybody. You can call if you're having problems in crisis yourself, or you can call on behalf of someone else, but I would urge that. But the truth is, the suicide rate, and that's not to mention the number of attempts that are made that are not ever really documented, perhaps, or certainly not in the statistics.
Right.
But that's a huge number. That's like over let's see, 5,500. That's about 5,500 suicides a year in the construction industry, and that industry, and that's way too high.
Yeah, one is too many.
Absolutely.
If we look at it one life, because I think we do get numbers can kind of become, we can separate them from people, but
Absolutely.
when you say that, and that's, again, that's unfortunate, the ones that happen, that's not the attempts, and it's not the contemplations, right? So some people may never have attempted it, but they've contemplated it. And that's a whole different, to me, each time you talk about that, that's a whole different level, probably, of statistics and numbers and percentages.
Oh, yeah, that would be through the roof.
Yeah.
Just tell you.
Yeah, I was thrilled with 988 when I heard about that, because let's be honest, and I'm not trying to make fun, this is just how I roll, but it's like, I don't remember people's numbers now.
Exactly.
We just have them programmed in our phones, so it's like, no, we needed something simple like 988, that correlates with 911. And so it's, so I think that was a fantastic move
absolutely.
on whoever made that happen. So we've talked construction industry and statistics, and question, we are working to not be a male-dominated industry. Not that we don't want all the men. Hear me, men. I'm not saying we do not want you. I'm simply saying we want everyone, right? We want the women. We want people of color. We want all the people that have not been represented in our industry. We want everyone. That's what we want. We want more and more and more people. But I think that sometimes there are certain, we're back to stigmas and take ourselves back 10, 20, 30, 50 years, right? And what it was to be a man, men don't cry, and men don't do this, and men don't do that. And so how do you feel from again, a professional perspective, us being male dominated still impact us with regard to mental health?
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Well, obviously the impact, it would not be good upon women. That's pretty obvious. There are nearly 10 million males in the construction business, construction worker, or male construction workers. And statistics, once again, they vary, but somewhat around 1 million, maybe less than 1 million women. Now, numbers like that can only invoke all of the prejudices of a patriarchal society. I mean, there's no other way.
Right.
That's what's going to happen. And when they crash in on women in the industry, the squeaky wheel either gets oiled or it gets replaced. And now replaced doesn't always mean you fire them.
Right.
But the numbers of women who are saying, forget this, the numbers of women who are saying, that's enough, I'm done with this, I'm out of here. So the squeaky wheel, if you squeak and start saying this is not right, you hope to get oiled, but in many cases, you're going to just get replaced when the numbers are as they are,
right.
As lopsided as they are. Martin Luther King once said, freedom is never given voluntarily by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed. So the worst stigmas, I believe, are covert and coded. They gaslight and they stand guard in defense of male superiority. And an example would be things like terms of endearment. With a woman, you hardly know it all. Like, hold this in place, sweetie. Hold this in place, sweetie.
Yeah.
Or hey, girl, or hey, babe, as if she's your girlfriend or your wife or your daughter. Those are covert signals of male superiority. That's what those are. Or gaslighting, embedding that you will never, embedding in the person that you will never be as good as a good, strong man. That's what that kind of stuff does. And so when women, as in any profession, if you subject women to that, they got a choice. You can squeak and complain about it and hope that the squeaky wheel gets oiled, or it might get replaced.
Yeah. That's really, it's interesting because and I don't know, I've told you this, but we're working really hard as an industry on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so this is a subject that comes up often. And it's women, it's people of color, it's the LGBTQ community, it's a lot of things, right? It's religion, it's language, it's so many things. It's disability. Again, like the list could go on and on and on. It's single parents, it's all of these things. But one of the things, hearing is that squeaky wheel that if I say something, the risk I'm putting out there. Now, mental health, one, you've got the anxiety and the stress of whether making that decision to say something. And then depending on what happens when you do, there could be more anguish, if you will. But when you were talking about the covert things and men, there was one gentleman he was confessing. He said, when I was seeing women on the job site, he said the problem I had was I would see my daughter. And so he said, I did it out of, like, his heart was right, I'm going to, in quotes, because he's thinking, I wouldn't want my daughter to carry that. I wouldn't want my daughter to do this or that. So it's like wanting to help. But what he realized was, I'm robbing this person of the ability to do their job and to learn and to grow. And so that's one thing we've heard is, like, a lot of times women in particular, but people of color as well, will get relegated to certain tasks, again, based on bias, discrimination, or sometimes they think they're doing the right thing, And then, but again, the impacts of that on that individual.
Exactly. Because a big part of mental health has to do with what a person feels about themselves. That's self-esteem. That's self-awareness. What do you feel about yourself? And the situation you just described does not facilitate that woman really having good feelings about who she is as relates to what's required as job performance. So there's no doubt about that. The best person, I think, to lead the field in changes that would avert sexism in industry would be men. I really believe the men. Number one, there's a whole lot more of them, to begin with. But we like to make ourselves feel good by saying we're trying to change things. We're trying to do better. But I'm telling you, trying, in my estimation, breeds a bunch of excuses. I don't see trying as doing anything but breeding a bunch of excuses. On the other hand, training creates culture. And so if we could literally take advantage of all of the wonderful trainings in that area, and they are all over the place because the problem is all over the place. Take advantage of the trainings, then we can create a different and better culture within the industry. But this idea of we're trying to do this and we've tried that, I think that breeds just a bunch of excuses as far as I'm concerned.
So that really, that's another resignation, not resignation, resonation for me. Because we're about training, particularly like what we, the Electrical Training Alliance, do. It's literally in our name, right? It's training. And so the whole point is we're training the best electrical workers, the IBW, NECA, and us, the ETA. So it's like, we're not trying the best we're not trying and hoping it works out.
Exactly.
We're training them.
Exactly.
And so it's like, why would we not think training was a part of, whether it's our mental health, whether it's changing our culture? Like, of course it's training.
Exactly.
But you got to hear it to really let it sink in.
Yeah, as you look at me, you wouldn't think, well, that dude could walk a mile in maybe 9 or 10 minutes. You say, I don't know, he'd be pushing it. Now if you put $1 million at the end of it, I would do everything I possibly could. I'd try as hard as I could.
Yeah.
Probably still wouldn't do it.
Right.
On the other hand, you give me 3 months and say at the end of 3 months, that $1 million is going to be at the end of that line if you can walk a mile in 8 minutes. I tell you what, I'm going to train for 3 months and get that money.
Right.
Because training will allow you to do what you otherwise could never do just by trying. Just couldn't do it.
Yeah. And you put money at the end of that mile. And I think that's important, though, for our industry, because we should be doing the right things. Incentives.
Incentivize.
In fact, for those of you listening to this podcast, at the end, we will do a drawing for, just kidding. There is no $1 million at the end of this. You're going to put you're a participant, you're disqualified. But that's when we should be doing the right thing because it's the right thing. And all those wonderful pieces of information that we have, but in our industry, money is involved, and we need market share. We need to be the ones doing these jobs. We also need the workers to do these jobs. And so you're talking about money, and we're not going to get to where we need to be in our mental health, in our diversity, if we are not training. Absolutely. We're going to just end up trying. I'm stuck on this. And, and then we're going to fail because we've not made the efforts to make this all it should be. And so I think that's a really good point. Like because again, if we're not getting the market share, if we're not getting the membership, if we're not getting, the number of apprentices we need, that causes stress. And absolutely. Now we're back to our mental health, right? And then we're arguing with each other and we're fighting. So instead of being this brother and sisterhood that we're supposed to be, unified, doing this together, now we're pointing fingers at each other because we're all stressed and worried about what's coming next.
Exactly.
And we've created our own problem.
Exactly.
Like, look at me getting therapized here, people. You have just welcomed yourself to my therapy session on the pod. No, we will never air that. So kind of thinking of that, like our leadership, and we have fantastic leadership in our industry, and I do believe they care. I believe they care about the people, but we need to create safe spaces. We need to create these spaces for conversations about mental health. And what would you suggest? Again, this is your professional opinion, kind of a generality. I know that's not fair to you, but how can we be better prepared to assist those, whether they're in our care or the people on the job with us?
Okay. I'm going to tell you that. Okay. We are going to talk about stress. Right?
Okay. Yes.
We
yes.
are
Yes.
going
Yes.
to talk about stress. Okay.
Yes.
Let's make sure we talk about stress. You brought it up.
Yes. Let's talk about stress. Yeah. Okay. And the stressors in our industry. Yes. Okay. Let's talk about that before we talk about how we can help it. Let's talk about what stresses us.
Let's do that.
What ails us? Not me. Remember, this is not a therapy session for me. What stresses people in our industry?
Okay. So, the research suggests that the biggest stressors, in the construction industry, have to do with the first thing you think of, being underpaid is the one that always comes up to the top. Having good health is what's considered. Remember, I'm talking about stressors. Keep that in mind as I'm talking, stressors. And not getting time off, long hours is talked about. Long hours leading often to too little sleep. And I'll tell you right now, a number of mental health issues could readily come close to being resolved if the person will get adequate sleep. So many times when people come into my office with issues, that's often the first question I ask. And so if you got long hours and then you're not getting adequate sleep, you talk about living in stress. That will do it for you. Dangerous work environment, as you're well aware of. Job security. Not long ago, and still even COVID concerns are stressors. 60% of construction workers live with stress. Now, that's interesting because 60% we know live with stress. However, only 1/3 of those will admit it. And that's where the problem comes in.
Right.
But think about this. Stressors are difficult to control. Stressors are very difficult to control. Stressing, however, can be controlled. And we need to really understand that there is difference. There's stressors and then there's stressing. Stressors are the things that I mentioned to you. They are actually extrinsic. Stressors are. They come from without. Stressing is intrinsic. It comes from within. And stress itself is akin to worry. It is an anticipation or a response to the stressor. So we spend a lot of time trying to control the stressors, and the truth is, it's a good thing to try to deal with these stressors, but you're never going to control the stressors. You're never going to do that. Now, the stressing, you can control.
Right.
Poor mental health always has to do with responses. It's not what happens in life, it's how you take it that generates the stress. It's not what happens, it's how you take it. That's what generates the stress. It's what you tell yourself about your circumstances. It's what you tell yourself about your situation. It's your predictions. It's your worry. That's what causes you stress, not the act itself. It's your catastrophizing, your awfulizing. That's what really causes the stress. There was a study done with some students at Penn State, and these students were were asked for 30 days to list the things that they most worried would happen to them. 30 days. And most of them came up with 3 or 4 different things that they worried would happen to them. At the end of those 30 days, 91% of those things never happened. 91%. And there's been research done like that over time, over decades, to where the things that we worry the most about never happen. And if they do happen, sometimes they happen in a way that's beneficial to us. And most of the time, if they do happen, they don't happen in the way that we thought that they would happen. But 91% of what people worry about, the stressors that come and they worry about them and let it become stress or stressful, never, ever occur.
And you mentioned what we're saying to ourself, essentially,
Exactly.
right? The things we're thinking intrinsically. And and I know we've talked about this with regard to our efforts in DEIMB, but the voice you believe the most and the one you hear the most often is your own. So whatever you're saying to yourself, you believe and you trust. And so if we are not being kind to ourselves when it comes to our stress, right, or telling ourselves this thing's gonna get me, it's going to take me out, it's doing this, it's doing that, we believe it. And if we're not recognizing, I think you said 1/3, me and numbers don't go well, but
Exactly.
but there's 1/3 that will it not admit it.
Exactly.
So you're saying it to yourself, though. You just won't admit it out loud, probably. Most likely, you're having some kind of conversation with yourself. So now you're actually admitting it. You're just not admitting it to the right person, essentially, that could actually help you. And so then it's just creating this vicious pain on yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, okay, so now we've got these stressors and recognize the difference, right? This thing happens, I can't control it. What do I do about it myself? So then we're going to take responsibility for each other, right? Because I know that you've got stuff, because I've got stuff. We all have things. We might not be admitting it. We might not be talking about it. Possibly not even talking about it with a person like a mental health professional that could help us. But what can we do to be better prepared to assist those around us? What is it we should think about, look for, those types of things? And this doesn't just have to be at work. I want to make that, we're talking about professional, but I want to make sure we're thinking about the people in our household or in our friend circle and so forth. But more specifically, I guess I'm talking industry.
Right. Well, the biggie, I guess, that most people are concerned with is suicide, whether or not a person, is at the place where they're contemplating taking their own life. And there are some things that are pretty obvious that you want to look for in that case. When people are withdrawing from loved ones, withdrawing even from society. And one of the most obvious ones, if they literally are threatening to kill themselves.
Right.
If they're making threats like that. And then, of course, if they have the means, if they have a plan, you need to 988 as quickly as you can get to it. That's crisis mode. If they for some reason all of a sudden start talking about death or writing about death, or if they increase alcohol use or drug use, if they're behaving reckless. I remember when I took a course called Crisis Intervention, and I remember my professor way back when I was preparing to become a therapist, and he used the term thanatos, and it stuck with me, and he talked about people just who drove wild, who did wild, crazy stuff. And he said, they're thanatos, and it says having a death wish, just doing wildly insane stuff. If all of a sudden somebody has not been a person that does that kind of stuff, then they're doing it, then, pay attention to that. Sleeping all the time or not being able to sleep. A lot of times it's extremes. If you see a person going from one extreme to another in any way, shape, form, or fashion, that just might be a red flag to you. As leaders, in the industry or wherever, or openness. When you find people who are dealing with not just suicide, but just mental health issues, when they're just not quite, themselves, we need to be very open about it. Openness, it disarms it. It's like if you hide it, cover it up, then it has power. If you can get it out in the open, then it begins to disarm it. So in our settings, in our workplaces, if we can have openness, and we should have openness because everybody deals with this.
Right.
Everybody deals with it. If we could train those who supervise how to address subordinates, how you should address them. You should address them void of any judgment, absolutely void of any judgment. Encourage self-care. A lot of times, this concept of let's man up, come on, encourage self-care. Time off is a big deal now relative to mental health. Mental health days, the concept of mental health days, space and time to relax, and teaching people how to breathing techniques and how to relax, and go take a minute, if this is becoming anxious for you. Institute policies within HR's human resource departments that have to do with space and time and relaxation in difficult situations. Facilitate a workplace that's really safe for conversation. If you can create a workplace that's really safe to talk about this, free enough that you can validate, and we should be validating what people are feeling. Validation is never I know how you feel. Validation is more of, wow, I can see that that's really troubling you. That's validation, not I know how you feel. That won't work.
Right.
Self-disclosure. Just be open and honest. Just say, man, I've gone through some difficult stuff, and if you're interested, I'll tell you what worked for me. That kind of thing. Those would be the suggestions.
And would you say the same of, because I would think with some of those, it would be whether I'm leadership or whether it's just someone I'm working with or sitting next to in the classroom. How are we looking out for each other? Is it a lot of those same things, or are there some other things?
Some of the same. Obviously, leadership, has a bit more authority. They can institute certain things, and they can certainly demonstrate what should take place through their own actions.
Right.
And to demonstrate it from the leadership perspective, and to be open, and that would go a long way.
Right.
But when it comes to the brotherhood and sisterhood that you speak about, the no judgment certainly fits that. The no judgment, the validation of feelings certainly fits that one. I like to think of it this way: if you see something, say something, especially when it comes to someone in crisis. Sometimes we live in a society, unfortunately, where people will walk right by people in trouble because, I don't know if I should get involved in that,
Right.
And that's really sad.
It
That's
is.
really sad. That's a stigma. We've got to stop that. So when you see something, say something. We don't want to inquire. If somebody looks like they're struggling, man, what is it going to hurt you to inquire? Getting your feelings hurt? What's getting your feelings hurt, compared to this person may really need some help?
Right. Right.
I was just flying in here, just flying in here to be with you. I saw something that really, it made me sad. There was a person who was blind, and he had a person who was helping him to get to the restroom, but it was a female, and she could only take him so far. And then right at the beginning, he had his cane, and he was just feeling along, trying to get in there, and people were hustling and bustling all by him, trying to get there. And I just took him by his arm, and I just said, "Are you trying to find the urinal?" "Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Could you just point me to the..." And it took me 10 seconds just to point him. I said, "It's immediately on your left," after I got him to that. And I thought, man, there's some people in society, come on, we're human beings.
Right.
This is who we are.
Right.
And so when you see something, say something. And of course, use the 988 we talked about, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can actually call it, you can text it, you can even chat, with a trained counselor. So it's available for all of those.
Excellent. And if you don't mind me adding to, if you see something, say something, and if you see something, do something.
Exactly.
Because that's what you did, right? You saw someone in need and you did something about it, but you offered, like you didn't just take over and drag him where you thought he needed to go.
Absolutely.
You asked, did he need?
Absolutely.
And if he had said, no, I don't want help,
Exactly.
then you have to accept that, right? But you were there. And even sometimes we walk away thinking we failed, but you don't know what the kind word or simply the offer of helping can do for someone and can change the course of their day. So I think that that's important. Let me ask you a question. Are you willing to share your contact information? So if someone that's listening says, hey, I want to do more, I'm leadership and I want to figure out how to do more, or I want to be a better brother, sister, sibling in maybe in my home or in my workspace, like, would you be willing to share your contact information to at least like help guide them? Not asking you to give away free service, but I'm saying would you be willing to share that? And you don't have to do it on here. We can just provide it later.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm willing to do it. I'm not prepared to do it.
Yes.
So,
No.
So the last part, we can do it later. Yes,
Perfect.
I'm definitely willing.
Yeah, they know how to get in touch with us because we have an email address for this podcast, and then most of them know my email address as well. So we could make sure people could
Can
get
I give
that.
one more thing just to?
Absolutely.
I think this is really crucial for individuals. When people are struggling, not all the time, but when people are struggling, a lot of times there are easy fixes. Easy fixes. And I want to give you one that I think is a really easy fix to when you're struggling. A lot of times when you're dealing with anxiety or especially depression, the tendency is to do nothing. That's not the thing to do. It's not the thing to do. Our bodies are created to where we have this chemical called dopamine, and there are ways to boost dopamine. And I promise you, if you boost dopamine within your system, you are not going to feel the same way that you felt. You just are not. And some of the simplest ways to do that, if you eating protein, consuming protein helps. Exercise. Just 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes of exercise, and you're subject to absolutely change how you're feeling. I mentioned proper sleep. Man, do everything you can to get 7 hours sleep at least. Listening to music. I suggest that you create a playlist of the music, and the playlist should be based upon how you feel when you listen to certain songs. Certain songs that just make you feel better. Believe it or not, dopamine gets released just from listening to music.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Not sad heartbreak breakup songs.
No,
not those.
Well, you know. And meditation, solitude, that will help you tremendous. there's some research that was done that said you can experience a 65% increase in dopamine just by meditating an hour.
An hour.
An hour. Sunshine does it. So my suggestion is meditate in the sunshine.
Ooh. Look, you could take your music. You could hit a few of these in one. Right.
But stuff like that people, because when you're going through something, depression or the thing you want to do is sit around, feel sorry for yourself. I tell all of my clients, do right until it feels right. Do right until it feels right. You got to do stuff because the universe never rewards thoughts. It never rewards plans. It never rewards ideas. It never rewards concepts. The universe only rewards action. That's all it rewards. You can have the best ideas, the best concepts, but you got to swing into action with them. And I've given you a list of things that you can do to swing into action when you're feeling low, depressed. Do right until it feels right.
Yeah. And I'm glad you gave those. I think that's an important way for us to wrap up, because we've talked about all these statistics, we've talked about data, we've talked about how it impacts our physical health, and how mental health, is impacted sometimes by our physical health. When we get ailments, then we can feel down. And we've said all these things we can do for each other, but I think leaving it at that, where the one person you're with all the time is you. And so when you have this list of things that you can do for yourself, you've empowered yourself, you've taken some control, and I can do this, whether I can get to a therapist right now, whether I've got support around me, there's something I can do in this moment to help myself. Now, call 988. Don't try to take it on yourself. Right. That's by no means. Take the medication, see the therapist, talk to someone. But I'm simply saying, in that moment, also take this list, right, and find something that you can do while you seek possibly the appropriate help.
Absolutely.
Dr. Charles, thank you. I am better today now. I will get my dopamine has risen, and I'm good to go now. I'm going to sing a little song, but not for you all. Don't worry. Again, we don't do that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, your experience to share with us. We really certainly appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charles. You helped highlight the importance of taking care of ourselves and our mental health, and then how to also take care of and support each other. And I think that's priceless information for us simply as human beings, and then certainly within our industry. And certainly, we also appreciate you being so willing to assist and share your information for anyone that's interested. And so speaking of, if you're hearing this and if you wanted to reach out to Dr. Charles for more information, just send an email to SayWatt, SayWatt at electricaltrainingalliance.org, and we'll make sure to get you connected. Big thanks to you, the listeners. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. And thank you for taking care of yourself. I know that if you weren't before, you are certainly going to be now. And remember, we do want to hear from you. So if there's topics you want us to discuss, you send an email. That's the same one we just gave you, SayWatt, SayWatt at electricaltrainingalliance.org. Our next episode will drop in June. Until then, stay connected through our blog posts, newsletters, social media, through this podcast. Stay powered up, and we will see you next time.
Say what?